Everybody's here. I've called to order this meeting of the Oversight Committee of the Cancer Prevention Research Institute of Texas. It is 10:02, so we got to make up 10 minutes, 2 minutes during the meeting. I would like to welcome our newest member, Dr. David Cummings. Governor Abbott appointed Dr. Cummings to the CPRIT Oversight Committee in August. Dr. Cummings, if you would please stand, I will administer the oath of office. Wow. This is hard. Raise your right hand, please. In the name and by the authority of the state of Texas, please repeat after me. I, David Cummings, do solemnly swear or affirm.
I, David Cummings, do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will faithfully execute the duties of the office of CPRIT Oversight Committee member of the state of Texas.
Of the office of CPRIT Oversight Committee member of the state of Texas.
And will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend.
And will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend.
The Constitution and laws of the United States and this state.
The Constitution and the laws of the United States and this state.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations and welcome.
Now you have to make him sing his alma mater school song.
I was going to say, that's the last applause you'll get as an Oversight Committee member. Unless you bring food. Will the board, Mr. Patel, will the board secretary please take attendance of the Oversight Committee?
Mr. Montgomery.
Here.
Dr. Rice.
Here.
Dr. Cummings.
Here.
Dr. Rosenfeld.
Here.
CPRIT staff has informed me that Mr. Marco, wait a second,
we didn't check on Dr. Cummings.
Will not be here today
Dr.
because of unavoidable conflicts. Thus, we have a forum.
Members, is there a motion to approve the excused absence of Mr. Margot and Mr. Angelo?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Members, the draft minutes from the August 24th Oversight Committee meeting are available in your agenda packet behind tab 1. Are there any corrections to the minutes as circulated? Hearing none, I will ask for a motion to approve the minutes of the August 24th Oversight Committee meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next is public comment. Public feedback is critically important to CPRIT because CPRIT was created to help Texans. Opening our meetings with public comment underscores this board's commitment to transparency and accountability. Are there any requests for public comment? Seeing none, we will proceed to the next agenda item, which is, I think, what will be a highlight for us all. Members, as you know, we often invite CPRIT grantees to make a presentation to the Oversight Committee about the work that CPRIT supports. We are fortunate today to have with us Dr. Livia Eberlin, a CPRIT grantee and recent recipient of a MacArthur Foundation Fellowship, commonly known as a Genius Award. Before we go any farther, in recognition of that award, could I ask for a round of applause for Dr. Eberlin? I don't know about the rest of you, but I've never met a genius in person. I'm so happy that you're here. I mean, as I said, I've never met. Dr. Wilson, would you introduce Dr. Eberlin for us, please?
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery and Oversight members. It is a privilege to have this opportunity to introduce our grantee presenter and, as you mentioned, a member of the recent class of the MacArthur Fellowship. Dr. Livia Eberlin is an associate or assistant professor of chemistry at UT, and her science journey began early as the daughter of two chemists in Sao Paulo, Brazil, where she attended the State University and then went on to PhD studies in analytical chemistry at Purdue and postgraduate research at Stanford before coming to UT in 2016. It was during her graduate studies that she recognized that there was power in analytical chemistry that had not yet been harnessed to impact on clinical disease, and it led her to develop a device that she calls the mass spec pen that would bring this analytical capability to impact on revealing the complexity of human tissues, and more specifically and related to CPRIT, the ability to potentially differentiate normal tissues from cancer and to bring this close to patients. She's then pursued a series of CPRIT awards, which really are elegant examples of translational research that she'll tell you about to evaluate the effectiveness of this technology at the bedside. And so it's a real pleasure to have Dr. Eveline here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. We had, first of all, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. That was really kind. Yesterday I was at the Cancer Institute at Dow Medical School, and we had these 1-minute presentations by the students, and they did perfect. And I told them, faculty could never do that. We could probably speak for like an hour. So it's kind of the same situation here. I'll try to pack a lot into slides, and I hope just if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. So my journey in analytical chemistry has been really focused on how can we adapt these amazing technologies that we have in the lab right now in a way that we can put it in the hands of clinicians and doctors and everyday physicians that could really impact human health and cancer diagnosis and so on. So the focus of my work is in ambient ionization mass spectrometry, and how can we use these tools for cancer research and clinical use. So just to give you an idea, let's skip a bit. Okay, just to give you an idea, I'm sure you have heard of proteomics assays, metabolomics, lipidomics, and these kind of techniques, they go from a complex sample, such as a clinical sample, a human tissue, or blood, or serum. And what they will do in these protocols is you'll do a 1 to 3 hours extraction of the compounds, the chemical molecules, and then you do some sort of chromatography, separation analysis, and then you do the ionization step for mass spectrometry, and finally you acquire the mass spectrum. So mass spectrometry has been around for over 100 years, and it really provides incredible molecular information from the tissue. But for you to think that you have to do assays that take at least 3-4 hours to get to that powerful molecular information is not really what we need in a clinical setting where critical decisions need to be made quite quickly. So in 2004, and at that point I was an undergraduate student, the field of ambient ionization was developed. I don't know why it's skipping so fast. And the idea was, can we go directly from the clinical sample to the mass spectrometry analysis? So we're still getting that incredible sensitivity, incredible specificity for molecular analysis, but in a matter of seconds. Because if you see in the top part, what really takes forever is the sample prep, right? Preparing the sample. But the analysis per se, the molecular analysis, is really fast. So we really wanted to just skip all the sample workup and do this all in the open environment, atmospheric pressure, in a way that we could do it every day very simply. So in my lab, the way that we do this is what we call with the chemical extraction techniques. And chemical extraction is a very basic chemical principle. We do it every day. When we make a coffee, for example, what are we doing? We're getting water and extracting compounds from the coffee powder, right? And in the same way, we can use solvent, liquid, and even water to extract molecules from a piece of tissue or a biopsy, and then analyze that liquid with mass spectrometry in order to get these molecular profiles. And you can imagine you can do this in a variety of ways. In my lab, we do it in mainly 2 forms. One is what we call desorption electrospray ionization, or the DES-EMS, and the other one is what you may have heard of, the mass spec pen. With DESI, the advantage of this technique is that we can really confine these droplets of solvent to a tiny spot so that we can do spatially resolved molecular imaging. And this is really powerful for several applications that I'll show you today. And then with the mass spec pen, the idea was, how can we adapt this even further into one handheld device that's very easy to use, completely automated, so that surgeons and clinical professionals could be really using this every day. So these are pretty much 2 versions of a similar experiment that provide a range of capabilities for clinical use.
Does the mass spec pen use some kind of a droplet that gives you some liquefaction or something?
Correct.
Okay.
So I'll go back to that.
What is that, water?
Yes.
Okay.
So with, let me go back. So with the DESI experiment, and I'll show you more in the next slide, we are streaming a charge of a spray of charged droplets, and these droplets are really tiny. It's really a tiny spray. And in that case, because it's being done on glass slides or biopsies, it's all ex vivo, outside of the human body, we mostly use organic solvents that are very efficient at extracting molecules. So ethanol, methanol, acetonitrile. With the mass spec pen, we want to make it fully biocompatible. So at the tip of that pen device, we actually have a single water droplet that's held onto the tissue. And water is actually the main component of our cells. We're mostly made of water. So most of our molecules are water soluble. So we extract these polar small molecules that are soluble into the water droplet and then directly send it to the mass spectrometer for analysis. So no sample preparation, just directly analyzing the tissue, either in the form of a specimen, right? That's just a surgical piece of tissue, or you can do a histologic slide for liquid biopsies, fine needle aspirate biopsies, or tissue sections, which is really what's mostly used in clinic. Does that make sense?
Thanks.
Yeah. So with the mass spec pen, we can go down to about 2 to 3 millimeters. We've gone even 2.5 millimeters. And that really depends on the size of this reservoir that holds the droplet. And the cool thing is that we're using 3D printing, so we can adapt that to whatever the clinical need is. If you think about a brain cancer, a surgeon might want to be evaluating in the millimeter per millimeter. For breast or pancreatic, the area would be larger, so we can change that depending on the need. And for the DESI imaging experiment, we can go to 100 micrometers, so that's a lot tinier if you're looking at specific features in the tissue. Okay. So I'll skip this slide since we talked about this already. Well, okay. Yeah, let me just bring to your attention that we place the entrance of the mass spectrometer really close to the sample, so there's no intermediate step. So just think about it, the power of being able to acquire molecular information immediately, like in a second, and how that could be transformative for clinical applications. Okay. So by doing a spatial imaging, we can, I swear that I'm just pressing it one time.
What if I just come sit there and I'll change the slides for you?
No, I can do it here.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll do that. Okay, that's better. So by doing it with the spatial information, though, in the case of the DESI experiment, we can acquire pixel by pixel, and then we can even plot images. So you can plot an image of the molecular distribution. And these are hundreds of molecules. That's the beauty of mass spectrometer. It's not targeted analysis. We're looking at hundreds of molecules that are indicative of disease state, also prognostic, and so on. So you can get incredible amount of molecular information. Okay, so what kind of molecules we're looking at? At the low range of our mass spectrum, we're looking at metabolites that are very important in metabolism in the tissue and all of the processes that are involved with the Krebs cycle and so on. We look at fatty acids. We look at sterile lipids, lysolipids. We look at complex lipids in our membranes. And we also see cardiolipids and proteins that are small and easily absorbed from the tissue. Okay, so with the power of mass spectrometry, you can get a spectrum like this, and a lot of this may look like noise, but you start digging in the spectrum, and you see all of these are resolvable peaks. These are all distinct biomolecules that are being detected under a second. And even at the same mass, 816, you can distinguish two different lipids. And we can further isolate them, fragment them, and know exactly what their chemical formula is and structure. So it's really powerful in that way. In a way that I would say it's unparalleled with any other technique. And I'm slightly biased, I'm trained in mass spectrometry, but it's really unparalleled to optical technology and so on in the sense of the specificity of the molecular information. So these are some of the chemical structures if you're curious. I'm a chemist, so I love structures, but we can fully characterize the composition of these molecules, both in negative ion mode and positive ion mode, which is mostly for acidic and basic compounds, so we can see a range of molecules in that way. Okay, so I'm extremely passionate about adapting these technologies to solve critical clinical problems, and I think that's one of the things that I love doing the most is interacting with clinicians and truly recognizing the needs. there are certain applications where this is not enough, doesn't provide all of the information that we need, but there are certain needs that time and accuracy and precision are critical, and in that way we can provide new tools to assist in clinical practice. So we're looking at preoperative diagnosis. One of my favorite projects I'll show you next is with thyroid cancer, and that was funded by CPRIT, trying to better diagnose fine needle aspirate biopsies before surgery. And then we're also looking in the operating room with the mass spec pen, trying to help with surgical margin evaluation and also sentinel lymph node analysis. Okay, so these are the main areas of my lab in my website. If you want to take a look, we have more information there. So what I love about being in Texas, and I came from Stanford, and there was a really small medical school, very limited samples, but here we have Dell Medical School and the Texas Medical Center that see over 5 million patients a year. It is incredible resource. I have never had the ability to do research with just the time frame and the resources that we have here. So I'm incredibly thankful to be able to work with MD Anderson and Baylor College of Medicine, which are some of my main collaborators in these projects. Okay, so we've looked at a variety of cancers and different tissue types, and I'll start by telling you a little bit, and these are the three main funding that I have from CPRIT for thyroid, lung, and ovarian cancer. So I'll tell you about thyroid cancer. Thyroid cancer is the most rapidly increasing cancer in the U.S., and what's really fascinating about it is that, once someone detects a lump in your thyroid, first thing that you'd go is go in for a fine needle aspirate biopsy. So it's really a hollow needle that the doctor will just poke your lump with, the thyroid lump, and then expel those cells in the glass slide. Well, once you have a suspicious lump, it may be that you'll have this biopsy done, and in about 20% of the times, this diagnosis is indeterminate, meaning that from the histologic point of view, you cannot tell if this person has a cancer or just a benign condition. You cannot tell. 20% of the times, a patient will get a report that says indeterminate. You just don't know. So what's next? What's next is these patients undergo diagnostic surgery. So literally, people that you do not know if they have cancer or not are undergoing surgery that costs thousands of dollars and removing their thyroid just to know if they have cancer or not. Okay, for follicular type of tumors, you can either have a benign condition or a malignant condition. And once you remove this thyroid, then a pathologist will be able to tell if it's cancer or not, but post-surgery, right? So in about 20% of the times, yes, it is cancer. This is successful. You removed your thyroid. You're good. Now, in about 80% of the times, it's benign. So this person is undergoing surgery just to know if they have cancer or not, and they do not have cancer 80% of this time. So these are completely unnecessary surgeries that are being done because there's no method that can analyze these biopsies before and provide the level of sensitivity and accuracy needed to better define the treatment option. So this is a problem that's been investigated with genomic assays, and these are entering the market right now. But it's really an opportunity for us to use as well mass spectrometry approaches that could give this answer from a fine needle aspirate biopsy in a second. Okay, so this is work that I've been doing with James Sullenberg and Dr. Wendong Yu at Baylor College of Medicine. It's an Early Translation Research Award that I received from CPRIT about 2 years ago. So we've been prospectively collecting these tissues. Right now we are at about 141 tissues, and we've looked at the adenoma and the carcinoma, which is the cancer and the normal, and we have acquired an incredible amount of data here. We have over 282 images, about 92,000 mass spectra that we've collected in positive ion mode, and 85,000 mass spectra in negative ion mode, and each mass spectra has hundreds of molecules. And now we're going through this data and looking at these images and finding the patterns that correlate with adenoma and carcinoma tissue. So with the DESI experiment, the imaging experiment, what's really neat is that we can go now through these images and find the regions that are truly cancer tissues and truly, for example, the adenoma tissue or just inflammation, and then we can get the purity of that molecular information to build our classifiers. Okay. So just to give you an example of how the mass spectrum looks like, no, this doesn't make a lot of sense just looking at the numbers, but these are the molecules that I told you about: lipids, fatty acids, metabolites, and some proteins as well. We use statistical analysis and machine learning to now go through this data, which is overwhelming, and find the trends that are predictive of being cancer or normal tissue. And I could talk about this for an hour, but I'll just skip it. One of my favorite things is actually biostatistics. That I was trained at Stanford and love it. Okay. So these are some of our results. We now have about 140 samples, and we have achieved about 81% accuracy in the test set. I just got new results last night that we have bumped to 88% accuracy for a benign and cancer prediction. And we're still not in the 90s, which is where we want to be. However, to think that right now the accuracy is 0 preoperatively, and we're going to 81, it's really incredible.
Is the 80% accuracy, is that for specificity, sensitivity, or is that ROC?
That's overall. That's considering just the right predictions, considering in comparison to histopathology of the exact same tissues. And I can break down in sensitivity and accuracy, but they're similar. We have a little bit higher selectivity, where we're about, I think, 92%, and then our specificity, sensitivity is lower to about 75% for an overall accuracy of 81%. But I can definitely get those numbers for you. So comparing to the Afirma, which is the gene sequencing classifier, and they have now been over 1,000 samples, they have about 92% sensitivity and 52% specificity. And with our data, our specificity and sensitivity is it's closer. Yeah, so and these assays with the genetic sequencing, it's like a 1-week assay. You send your sample off, and $2,000-$3,000, and the ability now to do this in real time, I think, is super powerful. So we've collected about 110 finetoaspirate biopsies, and this is an example that I love. The top one is an adenoma, and the bottom one is a carcinoma from patients that we acquired the same day, and we were able to correctly classify the carcinoma, meaning that we knew before surgery that the patient actually had cancer or not. So, I mean, for me, it's still mind-blowing. I was like, oh my gosh, we can actually tell a diagnosis in under a second, and it's accurate.
What's FTA and FTC again? I can't figure out what the
So this
abbreviation
is
is.
follicular thyroid adenoma.
Adenoma and carcinoma.
That's the one that's benign. You do not need surgery, but you still get surgery because you need to know.
Yeah.
And then the follicular thyroid carcinoma is the malignant, which
Got
you
it.
definitely need surgery. Okay. We have a similar project in lung cancer, the same concept, where it's really difficult for cytologists to determine adenocarcinoma and squamous cell carcinoma. And again, you get finetoaspirate biopsies, they're indeterminate, and you have to undergo surgery just to know what you have. And the thing with lung cancer is that the treatment in terms of chemotherapy is completely different. But you wouldn't know that until you have surgery and you're actually been able to get that biopsy for analysis. So this is another example. We're working with MD Anderson and Dr. Eric Kressman. He collects a lot of these samples for us, and Dr. Katz, she's our pathologist, and she's done incredible work as well looking at this data. And here, in terms, I have it broken down in this case. We have in the training set of samples about 98.4% accuracy, so a sensitivity of 98%, specificity of 98.6%. And for the test set, which is independent set of samples, about 94.7% for both in that case.
You have a receiver-operator calculation?
Yes, we do. So we've used several techniques. Recently, we've been using deep learning. Google uses that a lot. We've used a variety of machine learning techniques, and we normally we do the balance of sensitivity and specificity with the ROC curve for analysis, yeah. And the beauty of machine learning as well is that the models that we build, and as I said, I'm not going deeply into that, but it picks the features that are predictive. So now we can go back and characterize these molecules, and we know exactly what are the biomolecules that are contributing to the disease state. So it also provides new knowledge in that sense.
So is
Are those
that,
different for every cancer?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
and does that evolve into potential biomarkers?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. When we're looking at metabolites, it's more complicated than the gene biomarker, because with gene you can do a knockdown, right? A knockout study where you stop that gene. In metabolites, they are implicated in several pathways. So in that sense, it's harder to test a metabolic biomarker in the lab. But these pinpoints to pathways, and then we can go back and see what are the proteins that are implicated in
sorry.
these pathways. Are we running out of time?
No, he said, please use the mics. I'm sorry, when I ask a question.
Yeah.
We're all talking without microphones.
Sorry.
Yeah.
We are probably running out of time.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Can the audience hear Dr. Eberlein? Okay, great.
So we can go back and characterize all these molecules. And again, I'm trained in mass spectrometry. I love characterizing molecules. And we have actually found molecules that have not been described before as biomarkers. Or in the case of thyroid cancer, one of our first papers, we found these oxidated cardiolipins that had never been described in human tissue whatsoever. So it's been really exciting in that way. Okay, so I've also been working with Dr. Sood. He's at MD Anderson, and this is also funded by CPRIT, where we're looking at ovarian cancer. And here, really, one of the motivating aspects of this work was that his lab identified a specific gene in high-grade serous ovarian cancer, the fatty acid binding protein gene, that was correlated with surgical outcome. So they found that these patients that have high expression of these genes, they just normally do better in surgery. So they have a better recurrence, there's more, they can remove more of the cancer, and they normally have a higher survival. And that's really intriguing, and what's even more intriguing for me is that it's a lipid-related gene. So we thought, okay, what are the molecular mechanisms? How can our data provide new insights? But also, what if we can detect the AND product and be able to tell surgical outcome? So not only the gene level, but these gene has, right, it's a cascade of events, and then we can actually detect the metabolites that are implicated. So we started this project, I think it was right when I got here, and it's been really fun to work with Dr. Sood, and he's incredible. And we're also testing for ovarian cancer in the OR with the mass spec pen. The MD Anderson IRB is almost approved, so we're excited about that. Okay, so this is another example of the molecular images that we got. And here you can see really the spatial information in the lining. That's why the 100 micrometers can be really important. Some tumors, like the borderline tumors, which are less aggressive, it's really not like a massive mass, right, a big mass of cells. They are scattered around these glands, so now we can go and really extract the information with high precision, so we know we're just getting from the tumor tissue. That's really valuable, again, to build the molecular classifiers and see these molecular predictors. And for this project, we've identified over 50 molecules that are implicated in ovarian cancer diagnosis. So this glycerophosphatonolamine, very high in high-grade, really aggressive tumors. And then we have ceramides that are very high in borderline, non-aggressive tumors. Same class of tumors, but just different aggressiveness. And then this is for normal tissue and so on. So in that way. In this case, we have about overall 95% accuracy, and I could definitely break down as well in sensitivity and specificity.
Is there an exercise that you go through that tries to match gene abnormalities with these chemical abnormalities? And obviously people are trying to characterize genes, but are you finding new suggested genes based on what you're seeing
That's
on
the
the
direction
bottom
that
side?
we want to go. We haven't done as much. For the thyroid project, it's in the very near future, because we have all of these gene information from the classifiers and the other technologies, and we want to correlate with our data. One of our thoughts is that we could even combine them, both of this information, to make it even more accurate. But yeah, that's a really good thought.
Yeah, thanks. Good.
Okay. So in the ovarian cancer project, this is my most recent CPRIT grant. We're also looking at predicting treatment response, as I said, with the surgical outcome, but also how there are metabolic changes in different therapies, and if we can really see which patients would respond to therapy based on the metabolism of their cancer as we detect with these technologies. Okay, I'll jump into the mass spec pen. As I told you, with the mass spec pen, we're really trying to put the same time of assay, but a lot simplified in a one tool that's, I should have brought one, really easy to use. Anyone can hold. You're really welcome to come to my lab, and you can do an analysis. That anyone can hold, anyone can operate, and it's fully automated. And our question here really is, we know cancer surgeries are super complex. gross anatomy can tell a lot, but once you get to the margin, it's extremely difficult to know if all the cancer's been removed or not. So if we had a tool that can do that in the patient before the tissue is removed, that could be really powerful. So that's really what we're trying to address here. This is a closer view of the mass spec pen. We have a newer version now, so you'll see in the few more slides. But the principle is the same. In here, we really want to use water. We use just the sterilized water that's in the OR. And one single droplet is held into the tissue for about 3 seconds. And we have optimized that time to where we know 3 seconds it's enough to extract the molecules that we need to provide a predictive diagnosis. And it's the same type of molecules that I've been showing you. Lipids, metabolites, small molecules that are very indicative of disease state. So I like to show these pictures because it's so clear-cut. That's high-grade ovarian cancer. It's super aggressive. The medium is low-grade, and the bottom is normal ovary. If you have no training in mass spectrometry, you can tell that these patterns are very different. So in the same way that you would use in Facebook, Facebook would tag your picture based on features, right? This is feature recognition. You can just look at these patterns, and what's incredible about our technique is that it's highly reproducible. So even across patients and tissue types, these patterns are very reproducible that we can identify in really quickly in the operating room. One of my favorite features about the mass spec pen is it's non-destructive. So before and after, you cannot tell we analyzed, and this is really important for clinical use. Because to be able to tell a surgeon, look, we're testing this technique, but it's not going to alter your clinical workflow. It's very different than say, oh, we're going to use a laser and we're going to ablate and it's going to be whoa. We need this sample to do our standard analysis. So now we're doing this analysis, but we're not altering their workflow. It's an additional step, but the specimen is still there. And we did animal studies at first to show that, but now we're actually in the clinic. So we have about 97% accuracy with the mass spec pen. We've looked at over 700 tissues in the lab. And these are the different types of tissues we've looked at. And then now it was September 25th, our first surgery, and you can see I'm super excited right there. So that's our newer version of the mass spec pen that I'm holding. We made this orange box that goes into the mass spectrometer, and we installed it at Baylor College of Medicine. This is IRB approved here at UT and as well at Baylor, obviously, so it's all good. And that's one of our first analysis right there. That's being used in thyroid surgery, so that's a thyroid cancer case that we were analyzing in the mass spec pen.
Is the mass spectrometer in
the OR? Yeah.
How big is it?
It's pretty big, so it will sit in a table like this, about this size. Yeah. But the thing is, manufacturers in mass spectrometry, it's really going towards the clinic. So I can tell you that most of the manufacturers are thinking we need smaller instruments. And the truth is, we don't need all the capabilities that these mass specs provide. You can do so many different types of experiments because they were built for R&D, right? They're built for research and discovery. But now we need just this one analysis in there. So we are in discussion with different mass spectrometer companies, and I think they all have the mindset that, okay, we need to make this smaller and just in a rolling cart that we can go in and out and be really easy. Yeah. So, okay, I think that's it. This is my research group at UT. So I have 11 students now, a lot of undergrads involved in the work. It's great group of people. I love them so much. They're awesome. They work really hard, but I equally love my clinical collaborators. And it's really cool to be able to find people that kind of see the potential in the same way that you do. And of course we're interfering with their work, right? We're there trying to do analysis of things they've been doing the same way for so many years. So it's really neat to be able to find, here in Texas especially, the type of mindset and clinical collaborators that are willing to do new innovative research and test new technologies, which, there's always risk, right? It can go really well, it can go really bad. And gladly, it's been going really well. Okay. So I want to thank UT Austin, obviously, for hiring me to come here, and my startup package has really been incredible, and CPRIT for the 3 main grants that's been really accelerating my research. I think that's the word that I want to say earlier. we can really accelerate cancer research in Texas in a way that I haven't seen in any other place that at least I have been in some other funding sources as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. I'm quite sure there are a number of questions. Who wants to go first? Oh, what a surprise.
From someone who's had a total thyroidectomy.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. I was kind of caught by the number of lipids that you can analyze when you're extracting with water. And I realize these are fatty acids, but
Yes.
I'm pretty surprised by that.
We get a lot of the questions. So most of the lipids that we are extracting are polar, have a polar head group. So choline, inositol, they're all water soluble. Of course, their solubility is not in water is not as high as in organic solvent, but it's they're still soluble in water. So we've detected complex lipids as well as small metabolites.
So I'd like to ask you a question about arachidonic acid metabolites. And I was just wondering if my knowledge here is really small, but my understanding is there's three pathways to metabolize arachidonic acid. And could you separate out those three pathways with your technique?
We cannot. So we're detecting the end product, and we don't know from the arachidonic acid that we're detecting what specific pathway is implicated in the abundances that we're reading. Is that what you're asking?
If you go down the different pathways, you get different metabolites.
Oh,
at the
yes,
end, so-
yes. Oh, the metabolites of the arachidonic acid. Is that the question? Yeah, so with our technology, we're detecting things that are at high abundance. So a lot of the times, we're looking at a specific metabolite that we might not be seeing in our mass spectrum. But the 303 that we detect, which is arachidonic acid, is just in its...
Just straight arachidonic.
Yeah, just its most common form. We could change solvents, and we can add additives and then target more specific molecules. And we do that, especially for fatty acid detection. We can add silver ions and get higher sensitivity for these type of molecules. But with our water standard analysis, what we see mostly is the parent 303, which is the main form.
Okay, well, let me talk to you offline, because I don't think too many people want to talk about arachidonic acid.
Please, more.
Yes, Dr. Patel.
Thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. I mean, I'm quite excited about spectroscopy for once. But do you see, this is in terms of cancer evaluation and longitudinal follow-up after treatment, I can see many possibilities. But do you see other roles of this technology that you have in human development, for example? That you can use this, or, for example, in epilepsy?
Yes, absolutely. We have been looking at other diseases. One that we are exploring here at UT with the Dell Medical School is endometriosis, for example, where we're trying to understand some of the biochemistry, but it also provide new tools for detection. So there's several applications. And again, it's untargeted analysis. We get a broad range of molecules that can be indicative of a variety of disease states. So, yeah.
And the follow-up question is just of interest to me, is that once you have a spectral fingerprint, so to speak, from the primary tumor, for an oncologist like me, for longitudinal follow-up in terms of efficacy of therapy, would be to use blood. Is there a correlation between the two that you've seen, or are you going to look into that?
So we are very good at looking at tissue and cells. So as long as we could separate cells that are cancer cells, for example, in a blood sample, and we do that, we have one project that we're looking at circulating tumor cells, but we don't start from the blood. We have to have a separation of these cells, and then we do direct analysis of the cells. But in that way, we could do blood analysis. There are other techniques in mass spec that are really powerful for biofluids that I think would be more appropriate. But we could look at cells that are separated from blood.
I'll take advantage of the time to have one more question. Does this technique also, could it lend itself to something like a strep screen, which is a different kind of reaction, but if you had a swab with something, you would have maybe some biochemical footprint for that, cultures, and early, so a whole number of other things that could be applications. Is that fair?
Yeah. we're trying to go in that direction, identifying bacteria and different infections. It's something that's been shown before with mass spectrometry techniques. And again, I don't see there's like a limit to what we can do in that sense. We need to start testing and seeing how it's going to work.
Very exciting. Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
One more, Dr. Rosenfeld. Well, Dr. Cummings, you want to make it a unanimous question?
This is my first meeting.
Yeah, come on, jump in. Dr. Rosenfeld.
Just had a question. Could you do a ICP-MS type analysis for metals, and could you determine isotopes?
We could. We'd have to think how we could go from the liquid sample to. I mean, yeah, it's feasible. I think so. We haven't coupled. Most of what we do is just we directly put the droplet in the mass spec. So we call it inlet ionization, where we're using about 350 Celsius to evaporate the droplets, and then there's a potential bias inside the mass spectrum that gets ion separation. So that's the main form of ionization that we've used, but it could be coupled to other ionization techniques such as ICP.
Thanks.
Awesome. They're great questions.
No other questions, right? Dr. Cummings, nothing? Okay. Ms. Cleveland, I just want to make sure you got all that down in the minutes. Okay, great. Perfect. Dr. Eberlein, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Fascinating work. Congratulations. Chair recognizes Mr. Roberts, but first, I do want to mention that in addition to the MacArthur Foundation Award received by Dr. Eberlein, CPRIT grantees have received some really astounding achievements. Dr. Jim Allison of MD Anderson Cancer Center received the Nobel Prize, and Dr. Chen at UT Southwestern received a Breakthrough Prize. And I think it's we had a little celebration yesterday with the CPRIT staff, congratulating them for all their hard work, but I did want to make sure that that got in the minutes, that we recognized this quite remarkable achievements by our grantees. So, Dr. Eberlein, you get all the accolades for the Nobel Prize and because you're here. Right? Anyway, Mr. Roberts, the Chief Executive Officer's report.
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. Is this on?
Not yet.
It's always on.
Oh,
It should always be on.
there you go.
Quickly, I've got a couple of items that I need to go over with you. With respect to the personnel update, we have posted the vacancy for the Chief Product Development Officer. It has closed. We have a number of applicants, and next week we are scheduling an initial round of interviews, and the timeline to get the person selected is on target. It should be met. We're looking at having this individual on board sometime middle to late January. So we are still on track to meet that timeline. As I always do at this presentation, on page 3-2 is a summary of where we are in terms of this fiscal year's grant awards funding available. If you approve the recommendations coming before you today, will leave us with a balance of $261 million for the remainder of the year, so there are sufficient funds available for today's awards. Then of particular interest, you will find also behind my tab copies of legislation that has been filed. I don't intend to go through these in detail, but these are major pieces of legislation. The first two by Representative Zerwas, a physician from outside of Houston, would, if approved by the legislature and the voters, increase our bonding authority to $6 billion. We've already, or will have already spent $3 billion, so it would be another $3 billion authorization. That would have to go through an election, presumably in November of 2019. The second piece of legislation attached to it HB 39 takes care of the prohibition against making new awards in the second to the last year or the last year of our existence, which is necessary to implement the additional bond authority. The third one, Senate Bill 200 by Senator Schwartner, is the same bill that he has filed in the last two sessions that would instruct the agency to develop a plan for financial self-sufficiency, i.e. to turn CPRIT into an evergreen fund. This bill has come close to being passed previously, but has not made it all the way through. After Senator Schwartner introduced this bill the first time, I guess it was 2015, if I remember correctly, CPRIT did incorporate in our annual report an analysis of self-sufficiency. So we, from what we can tell, have implemented this piece of legislation in our annual report, but it's not done as a formal separate report to the legislature. Also, at your seats, we've distributed a package that looks like this. It reads Texans Conquer Cancer, the Momentum Report, which is this quarter's update. It features a couple of new elements, heavily focused on Dr. Eberlin. The award to Dr. Allison with, of course, updated metrics. Complementary to this document are three handouts that are very close to being finalized. I'm still tinkering, particularly with the CPRIT reauthorization, but these are presented to you for your use, for your information. But these are what several of our key documents in persuading the legislature to reauthorize the agency. The other document, Real Momentum, Measurable Results, that has the two green balls at the bottom of the page, is the new version of something I have been using for the last year, and I believe is probably the most effective document I've got in my toolbox. The blue lines 1, 2, and 3 are what we are told statutorily to do, and then underneath it are 3 or 4 bullet points, though we have more, but 3 or 4 metrics that we believe document that we are accomplishing everything we have been told to do. And then the rest of it are metrics and graphs that illustrate what is taking place. There's a not quite so pretty document, though, Dr. Garcia and I discussed earlier today. We're going to pretty this up, if I can use that grammatically correct statement. But the bonds are an appropriate funding mechanism for CPRIT research. As Kristen Doyle likes to say, this is a one-pager that's crying out to be a white paper, but it provides a sound economic explanation of why bonds for research of the nature that CPRIT provides are a completely appropriate mechanism for funding. And the individuals that are going to be pursuing the bond authorization for CPRIT will probably be using this document quite a bit. There are some other materials that I'm very close to having completed. I'm trying to take advantage of, if I could call it a slow time in December, to get the committee presentation packages that will be used for our budget request, which will garner some attention. As you'll recall, we are requesting $164 million in general revenue exceptional item in order to keep us at a current level of effort. That exceptional item request in and of itself will garner quite a bit of legislative interest. That's not an inconsequential ask. The materials that will be in that document will be new to most of you. They won't be so new to Mr. Montgomery because they're expansions upon the presentation you made to THBI a number of months ago, but they're refined. And I really believe that they are going to be highly effective, and I will share those with you folks electronically in probably towards the end of the month or very early January. Moving on quickly to just a couple of other points. Though it's not a member of CPRIT staff, I'm sad to report that Cam Scott of the American Cancer Society's Cancer Action Network has taken a position in Colorado. The American Cancer Society is in the process of filling Mr. Scott's vacancy, though it is in the interim being adequately filled by James Gray, who was Cam's superior at ACS, and James was instrumental in working on the founding of CPRIT back in 2007, so we're not dealing with inexperience with that. Finally, we don't have them here, I don't believe, but we will be sending to you folks a potential order request. We have an opportunity to have polo shirts and button-down Van Heusen shirts that have a real nice CPRIT logo. We cannot use state funds, so we are making them available to the staff to purchase if they want, and we'll make those available to you folks as well. I intend to get one of each, and I will wear them every day to the Texas legislature. Just kidding. Though they would be appropriate. With that, I'll close simply by saying that I feel very good as to where we stand right now with respect to the legislature. There are a lot of positions to be resolved. There is a presumptive leader in the speaker's race. How he will make important committee assignments probably won't occur until late January, but he's a new speaker, and he may have a faster or a slower time period. But when the legislative committees are appointed, that will really allow us to focus on who we need to inform about all of our initiatives and requests. In the meantime, some of the players are known, and we work on them right now due to the holiday season. It's a little bit tough to get in to see them. They're most interested in changing offices and rehanging pictures, but I cannot stress my appreciation any more than by saying that we are extremely fortunate to have the champions that we have in the legislature on both sides. So we go into this very well. That is all said, these are really big requests that we have going before them, and it will not be easy. We've got great champions, but a constitutional reauthorization of CPRIT will be highly discussed. It's you know this. It's a big ask, and as is our exceptional item request. But I believe under your guidance and supervision that we can fully justify our reauthorization. And I'll stand on that. But if we don't get it this session, we will probably get it within the next 2 or 3. But this could be a 2, 3, 4 year slog. So I'll just leave it at that, Mr. Chairman.
I want to compliment, thank you, Mr. Robertson. I want to compliment Mr. Robertson. Perhaps you want to talk about the travels that you've made around the state as other staff members have, attending events and meeting with legislators. You've had a pretty active schedule in the last few months. I don't know if it's worth mentioning some of those.
I'll just do it quickly. We've included them in the monthly updates that we provide to you, but through both the American Cancer Society and the Texas Healthcare and Biosciences Institute, THBI, we probably have had around 15 events in the last 2 months across the state, and at those events, on a number of them, area legislators have been brought in, and it's as a result of those, partially as a result of those meetings, that I get the confidence that we have some amazing support out there. I felt very good after each one of those. I don't want to particularly highlight any one or two, other than to say that the one in El Paso was pretty cool. Mr. Margot participated in that, and it was tied up along with the announcement of an expansion of some commercialization development initiatives in the El Paso area, but it was something else. As I said, we've got some great friends in the advocate community, and all I can say is bless them.
Any questions for Mr. Roberts? Thank you very much, Mr. Roberts. Thank you for your efforts in the legislators, with the legislators, and in the various communities you visited. The Chair recognizes Mr. Burgess to present the Chief Compliance Officer's report. The most exciting part of our day.
Always a pleasure.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. You'll find my compliance program update behind tab 4. My report covers many of our compliance initiatives, including on-site and desk reviews, our grantee training and support, delinquent reporting, et cetera. I would like to direct your attention to page 4-3, where we provided an overview of FY18 compliance activities. And if you flip over to 4-4, there's a pretty little chart there for you. And this shows our delinquent reporting for the last 4 fiscal years from FY15 to FY18. And you can see the decrease, significant decrease from 15 to 16. Again, from 16 to 17, we had a slight increase in 18. And as you may recall at a previous Oversight Committee meeting, we talked about one of the reasons for that. We had some programming changes in our grants management system, and it required grantees to submit things in a specific order, reports. And so some of them had some difficulty with that, but that has shown some progress in the last few months. So we're going to be on track, I think. That dotted line represents sort of a self-imposed threshold, 5% threshold, roughly 28 reports. We have anywhere between 550 to 560, even 570 a month on average. So we are coming below that threshold, and as Wayne has termed it, which I think it's a great term, a structural non-compliance. So we would assume there's going to be sort of an ebb and flow of reports coming in from grantees. That next bullet on that page, 4.4, compliance monitoring reviews, we conducted about 258 of those reviews in FY18. That's roughly a 50% coverage. We did see a slight decrease this year in the number of findings from the previous year. So I know in the past we've talked about, is this the right amount of coverage? 50% is fairly high when you talk about auditing. I think Weaver's in the room, so don't get any ideas of 50% coverage. So we are looking at that this year as we're making our planning and what that looks like in terms of pulling back some of the auditing of grantee, especially if you've had an on-site review and 2 in a year have shown no findings, then do you need another review the 3rd year? So we're trying to look at that. Another issue that we're very proud of is the training and education. We provided 10 trainings this past year for our grantees, and we had over 540 grantees in total attend those. And those have been some great opportunities. We've also, we provide training for active grantees, new ASOs or authorized signing officials, new grantees. At the request of UT Southwestern, we traveled up there and did a technical assistance training for them. So we're very open to provide those opportunities for grantees. And again, we did 10 of those this past year. And as you can see, we also covered financial status report reviews, audit reviews, and compliance attestations. These are just a few of the tools or the initiatives that we're using to maintain the transparency and accountability of CPRIT. We're not always the most popular, and any compliance isn't, but we definitely feel like we have a vital role in the agency. And finally, I just want to reiterate that many of these initiatives are a team effort. It's rarely just the compliance staff. We do work with most every other group or department, as it were, in CPRIT. So it's definitely a team effort, and I applaud the agency as a whole. So any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Members, any questions? Dr. Rice.
Can you remind us, Mr. Burgess, what year you first joined CPRIT?
That's a great question, Dr. Rice. I happened to be hired in June of 15. Right before we saw that dramatic decrease in.
Imagine, look at that.
Just kidding.
Oh, now it makes sense.
Thank you. My other question was, I just wondered, and it's 21, 11, 18. Those are monthly averages, and I'm sure you think in this term. But is there any particular? Is there anything to learn from that? Meaning, are there institutions, and maybe you've done this, you directed training at the institutions that have the most frequent, or not institutions, but organizations, or because it could be institutions. Do you drive the training kind of tactically at those that are have the most problems?
We have. I'm sure there's always opportunity for improvement. I will say that, and I won't name the grantees, but there was one grantee in particular in FY15 that had quite a few delinquent reports, and we initiated a weekly and biweekly calls with them to really address specifically. And then we had a second grantee that seems to kind of pop up often, and these are grantees that have dozens and dozens of grants with us, and so we initiated a biweekly call with that grantee. So we definitely want to target as best we can and provide any TA opportunities that we can. So
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Any further questions for Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burgess, thank you very much. As I love to say, compliance doesn't matter until it does.
Right.
Thank you very much for your efforts. The chair recognizes Dr. Wilson to provide the Chief Scientific Officer's report and introduce the Program Integration Committee's grant award recommendations. Dr. Wilson.
Thank you. I think the agenda calls for us to consider first the proposed grant awards. And those are in the separate packet, so titled. The committee has recommended funding of 4 awards that reflect applications to the recruitment RFAs during the first quarter of this year. We'll be discussing 2 recruitment of established investigator awards and 2 first-time tenure-track faculty member awards. And these begin on page 9 of that separate handout. The first established investigator nomination is Thomas Wang, who is a physician-scientist, gastroenterologist, currently at the University of Michigan, and it is designed to enable his recruitment to UT Southwestern. Dr. Wang is a biomedical engineer as well as physician and has developed mechanisms for increasing the diagnostic acuity of endoscopy using fluorescent probes, and these have been noted to be quite informative and very exciting opportunities for the future of improving the diagnostic capabilities for colon cancer and esophageal cancers. The second nomination for an established investigator is Dr. Shendeng Bao, who is a cancer biologist who currently is at the Cleveland Clinic, and this award is intended to enable his recruitment to UT San Antonio Health Center at San Antonio. Dr. Bao is noted for his discoveries related to glioblastoma stem cells and his subsequent use of that information to identify and then to, with collaborators, develop interventions which hopefully will improve the therapeutics of this very difficult disease. The next two awards are in response to first-time tenure-track faculty. Recall that the Established Investigator Awards are up to $6 million each, and the first-time tenure-track faculty awards are at $2 million. The first is to enable the recruitment of Ansuman Satpathy, who is a physician-scientist pathologist who is currently at Stanford, to be recruited to Baylor College of Medicine. Both Dr. Satpathy and the next individual that I'll tell you about represent an exciting group of investigators who are really at the cusp of understanding, or at least probing, the reasons why immunotherapy both works and doesn't work. And as you can see, our review council, Scientific Review Council members were very taken with the accomplishments of Dr. Satpathy and his potential to contribute to the both Baylor as well as the Texas Medical Center's expertise in immunology.
Dr. Wilson, pardon me one second, but Dr. Satpathy has a score of 1.0.
Yes.
Which is the highest possible score. How often does that happen?
So
How often do you see
it turns
1.0?
out that that doesn't happen often, but it does happen. And I think that this reflects both the ability of our institutions to attract superb individuals, as well as the importance of CPRIT in making those institutions competitive for these individuals who, frankly, are being recruited to every other top medical center in the country. The second first-time tenure-track faculty recruit is Dr. Matthew Goodman, who is a cancer biologist, immunologist, who's currently at Washington University, and this award is intended to enable his recruitment to UT MD Anderson. He, as I mentioned, is also investigating the area of immunity resistance and why certain tumors actually are successful in responding to the current immunotherapies, as well as those that are not. So that is complete for quite exciting investigators with potential for real impact in Texas.
So I think we need to...
I had a question.
Yes, please.
I'm
Sorry, Dr. Rice.
Obviously, we haven't voted yet, so we'll do that in a minute. But I was wondering, I think back to the process that we go through when this oversight committee, approves these kinds of recruits, and I don't know that we get much feedback on success. I know we have actually generically talked about it, but I was just thinking next meeting in February, whenever, it would be great to sort of get a sense of how successful, if we close the deal on these, if you will, or whenever the right time is. Again, I know there's a sequence, and this gets approved, and then they go through other processes, perhaps. But it would be interesting, I think, for us to sort of know how successful our recruiting was and how many people actually show up in the state.
Absolutely,
and accept
yes.
it. And I have a general sense of that, and I know we've talked about that before, but I'd love to see a scorecard or something.
Yes, and I will be delighted to bring that information to you, and also tell you that we track that very carefully. And as you know, there is a lead time that involved. Yeah.
Thank you.
Dr. Wilson, I wonder if it's best for us to go ahead and vote on the proposed awards and then come back to the...
I think that's right.
Okay, great. So we need the compliance officer certification. Mr. Burgess.
Thank you, sir. In the proposed grant award booklet on page 28, you'll find my compliance certification. And this was also made available to you in the portal. The compliance certification details each step of the application review process, and that begins with the program officer's approval of the RFA all the way through the PIC meeting. And each step. Also central to the compliance process is the pedigree. And again, that just records each individual step. Those are made available to you as well in the portal as part of the CEO affidavit. I reviewed the supporting documentation for each peer review and review council meeting, and there's lots of pieces of paper involved in that. So there's the compliance pedigree, as I mentioned. We also have a third-party observer report that I review. We compare with conflict of interest sign-out sheets, attendance sheets. I review the program officer's memos and any conflict of interest forms. And I also attended the PIC meeting, the Program Integration Committee meeting on November the 1st as an observer, and I confirmed that that process followed CPRIT statute and administrative rules. After thorough review of the supporting documentation, I am satisfied that the application review process for the 2 academic research award mechanisms recommended by the PIC followed applicable laws and agency administrative rules, and I certify these award recommendations for your consideration.
Thank you very much. I believe no Oversight Committee members reported a conflict of interest with any applications to be considered today. Are there any conflicts of interest that members have not reported? Hearing none, we'll move on. Members, you have a list of applications and grant amounts recommended by the PIC for the Academic Research Grant Awards. The PIC's recommendations will be approved if 2/3 of the Oversight Committee members present and able to vote approve the PIC's funding recommendations. Dr. Wilson presented 2 academic research award slates. Rather than taking a separate vote on the different grant mechanisms constituting 4 grant recommendations, I will ask for a vote to approve both of the slates. If a member wants to consider one or more award recommendation individually, please make a motion to do so now. Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendation for recruitment of established investigators and recruitment of first-time tenure-track faculty members.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hearing approval from at least 2/3 of the members present and able to vote, the motion carries. I will now entertain a motion to delegating contract negotiation authority to the CEO and CPRIT staff to authorize the CEO to sign the contracts on behalf of CPRIT.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. Motion carries. I will now entertain a
Sorry. Now he's going to cut to us.
Right, sorry. Now we have to come back to Dr. Wilson for a excuse me, a review of the RFAs upcoming. That
Yes.
Well, anyway, take it away, Dr. Wilson.
Yes, thank you. So now we're back to the large book on Section 5, and call your attention to Section 5-1 through 2. We're discussing the RFAs, which will be reviewed in FY20, and I'm reporting on the recommendations from the Academic Research Subcommittee on the and for your consideration and action for RFAs that are being proposed for that cycle. These are in the category of individual investigator research awards, similar to the awards that you just saw presented from Dr. Evelyn. They also include specific targeted awards for individual investigator research in childhood cancers, in prevention and early detection with a focus on implementation research, and a fourth that focuses on clinical translation. Again, you saw some amazing examples of clinical translation research earlier today. I will also say that in addition to these four RFAs, the Academic Research Subcommittee is continuing to endorse the academic recruitment awards that will also be continued, and we'll be considering those formally later on in the year. But these, the timeline for these FY20 begin actually next month with the posting of the RFAs, believe it or not, and then the receipt of applications in the spring, the review in the early fall, and then your consideration of recommendations in February of 20.
Wow.
I think that's right. So,
It's a long time. Huh. Members, any comments, questions for Dr. Wilson on the proposed RFAs? Dr. Rice.
I'm sorry, but I just wondered, and I know we've talked about this before, but I just want to refresh. In the event that the legislature does approve balancing up the funding for CPRIT from the General Revenue Fund, as I understand it, does that open up the opportunity to have the addition of the legacy RFAs that we've now not included in this, or how do we think about that?
So Mr. Roberts will comment more specifically to your question, but in terms of the program's thinking is that the RFAs that you're referring to would be core facility, high impact, high risk awards, and possibly a continuation of the early translational research awards. We anticipate that that set of RFAs would be offered in FY21, given no change in funding opportunities going forward. However, if there are increased resources available, we believe that if we know about that information by June of this year, of 19, thank you, that we would be in a position to offer those mechanisms for a second cycle of FY20.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Yes, and we've discussed this extensively at the staff level to provide us with the flexibility if we get the exceptional item request or the bond reauthorization. But I always have to caution everyone involved with it that we have to assume current law, which is the amount of money that we've got now. But I do believe that we can move quickly, and presumably we'll know the answer to that by mid-May. Is about when the final appropriations bill's numbers will be there, and then they'll adopt it at the end of May.
Thank you.
Let's be optimistic.
I just want to mention to the members that our previous chairman, Pete Guerin, instituted the process of the Oversight Committee looking at the RFAs before they're actually sent out. So this is our opportunity to comment on how we are achieving our goals and whether we are, looking at the right things. I might comment that there are two RFAs listed on page 5-4 that specifically address liver cancer, which became a priority for the Oversight Committee and designated as such, so I'm quite glad about those. But are there any further comments from the Oversight Committee? Questions for Dr. Wilson? Yes, Dr. Rosenfeld.
Simple question.
Turn on your mic, please.
I'll always have a comment about core facilities. It seems like to me if the core facilities get funded, when would that be, 2019, something like that?
So the core facility RFA is currently open, and you'll be seeing the results of a review that would take place in May, in August.
Of 19.
Of 19 this year. In response to Dr. Rice's question, I mentioned that our thinking is that given the current resources available, that we would imagine core facility applications or RFAs would be offered in FY21. So in a sense, we would take our current 1 year, 2 cycles and spread it over 2 years. unless, of course, if there's additional resources. But we would bring back to you at the appropriate time those RFAs for your consideration. We're not asking you to approve that plan at this point.
So would there or would there not be core facility grants in 2019?
Well, those are currently, there's open RFA, and applications are being submitted as we speak for 19.
Well, if my calendar in my head is right, then if, say, like they're approved in 2019, the funds flow maybe sometime after that. Maybe the core facilities would start construction and be operational in 2022, but CPRIT may no longer exist. So does it make sense to fund a facility that won't start until after CPRIT terminates?
Well, let me answer that partially and then ask Mr. Roberts to weigh in. Our core facilities are actually not constructing new facilities. They're supporting innovative technologies and the like, and so we're not actually building facilities.
But you're buying
We're providing
analytical machines.
We're providing access to technology, and then, as I think you know, we're forward funding the entire application's approval. So, in many cases for core facilities, that's 5 years of funding that's being approved, and we're using the FY19 budget availability. And as far as I know, CPRIT will continue to be in business to administer those awards throughout that time, albeit perhaps in a different setting. But Mr. Roberts, any comments?
Yeah, Dr. Rosenfeld, that's a good question. But to take a step back, when we fund a project, we are funding it out of a future commitment of bonds that will be issued. We only reimburse grantees on the basis of expenditures that they have made. They will submit their receipts or proof of expenditures, and our grant accountants and compliance staff review those before we cut a payment to them. As we've discussed, it's been actually a couple of years, but we've discussed previously that for a core facility or any of our grantees, the actual bonds may not even be issued for a couple of years. And if CPRIT is sunsetted in 2023, there will be an ongoing commitment by the state of Texas. These are general obligation bonds. In order to issue those bonds, there will have to be some kind of oversight entity, whether it's CPRIT or the comptroller or whoever, to certify that the expenditures are valid. If our office in the Travis building disappears, the grantees are still going to be working for at least another 4 or 5 years down the road. So the issue you bring up is arcane appropriations process, but is very relevant. But we're covered. They're covered.
And just very briefly, from a legal
Chair will
perspective.
recognize Ms. Doyle.
Thank you. From a legal perspective, our statute contemplates that CPRIT can make multi-year awards. It also contemplates that we can make awards through August 31st, 2022. And so the statute is already set up for the possibility that grants will last past our termination date. And in addition to just disbursement of funds, we have a revenue sharing agreement with every grant that we make, not only our companies, but also with all of the grants that we make to academic institutions. So that will need to be monitored, whether CPRIT continues to exist or not. Some of these revenue sharing agreements won't really come to life until, maybe 10 or 15 years down the line. And so there will have to be structure set up to still monitor CPRIT grants and the state's interest in the revenue for many years to come.
And those questions won't be fully realized or resolved until the sunset process. The state sunset process, of which we are scheduled to undergo in fiscal 2023, addresses those particular issues. If an agency is shut down, what happens to its assets, what happens to the ongoing commitments.
Thanks for explaining that. My question really had to do specifically not with grantees in general, but specifically with the core facility part of that, where a facility may go out and buy a nice Agilent, since we're talking about mass spec, right? A nice Agilent spec machine, and it won't go into operation until after, it won't even start until after CPRIT sunsets. It's not like it will start before and continue.
I don't think those instances will occur, will they?
Yeah, so I'm not following the question, frankly. The core facilities are set up to, as you point out, if they're offering mass spec capabilities, they might acquire a piece of equipment, but what's being supported is the access to that equipment, and that would continue through the duration of the award.
Thank you.
Members, if there are no further questions for Dr. Wilson, I will entertain a motion approving the proposed FY 2020 Cycle 1 requests for applications and timeline as recommended by Dr. Wilson.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Does everybody doing okay? Do we need to take a break, or can we just keep going? Great. Yeah.
I moved for a break.
Okay, just a couple of minutes, no offense. So we'll be in recess for just a couple of minutes for a comfort break. In session at 11:38 a.m., the chair recognizes Dr. Garcia to provide the Chief Prevention and Communications Officer's report. Dr. Garcia.
Yes, my very brief report is under tab 6. I'll go over a brief update on the prevention program first and just tell you about the 2 cycles for fiscal year 19. The first cycle is currently underway. The reviewers are reviewing 20 applications that requested $33.7 million. In about 2.5 weeks, we'll be holding the panel reviews in Grapevine, and I know Dr. Cummings has expressed an interest in attending.
Great.
So we'd love to have you there, and anyone else who's interested.
Close to the airport.
I'm sorry?
It is very close to the airport.
That's the reason. It's close to the airport.
Yes, nice location.
Not at the Hyatt.
The Hilton DFW, something like that. It's very close. But if anyone else is interested in attending, I'm happy to send you the timed agenda for that.
I'd like to at least have the information. Great.
Will do. The second cycle for the fiscal year is also underway. Those RFAs were released on November 19, and those proposals will come to you in August. The 2020 program priorities are listed in this report, but you'll be considering those a little bit later in your agenda. The other activities that have kept Ramona and me pretty busy was the revision of the 2018 Texas Cancer Plan. I hope you all received your copy.
Thank you.
Good, good. So we're glad to have that document wrapped up, and that is my prevention report, very brief. If there's no questions, I'll go on to communications. Yes.
Dr. Rosenfeld,
Just one quick comment.
use the mic. Thank you.
That a couple of weeks ago, maybe there was reports in the New England Journal about looking at vitamin D. What the heck giving people what vitamin D does. And one of the things, if I recall correctly, was it did not decrease the chance of cancers, which was one of the things it was touted to do. And it just brought up the question about, do we do any active prevention studies sort of therapeutic prevention studies?
Those would be funded out of the academic research program, and there is a mechanism for prevention research under the academic research program. I don't know if vitamin D is included in that portfolio, but there's the opportunity.
All right, thank you.
Any further questions on prevention? Dr. Garcia,
Okay, communications update is follows right behind that, and you can read the memo. I'll just give you a couple of updates. We're happy to announce that this weekend we're going to be having a soft launch of the new CPRIT website. And a soft launch just means that it'll be live, but we're not announcing it to the public yet because
Other than what you just did.
well,
To the public meeting.
a big announcement. We'll do a big announcement later, but that gives us the weekend and a few days to sort of test it out in a live setting to see if there's any bugs, see if there's anything we need to fix. We're happy to send you an announcement of when it goes live so you can go on the site and look around a bit, but just know that it'll take us a few days to fix any issues or any bugs that might be there when it goes live.
I noticed that Terry Simon is not at this meeting. That
She
means
is
she's
working
nonstop. I
working
guarantee she's
24/7 on the
listening.
website.
So the new site has a new design, and that was previewed to the audit subcommittee a few months ago. So it's got a new design, a new platform. All of the statutorily required content, of course, will be there. All of the content from the old site will be there, updated. All of it will be updated, and there'll be some new features. So when you see it, play around with it. Like I said, we'll send you a notice and let you know when it's actually live. If you have any questions, please direct them to me or to Spencer. Spencer's the lead on the communications team for the website, and then we can funnel all of those questions or changes to IT.
Can you just give us an example of the new features?
Some of the new features, there'll be our impact section that really tries to highlight a lot of the things that we have in, say, our momentum report and our other documents about what our impact has been. Another new feature will be a digital newsroom where we can put a lot of the content that we're creating. We're creating a lot of videos and our press releases and everything in a much easier to find way. And it's also a good resource for the media to go to and find things very quickly. So there'll be a digital newsroom. There's also a new feature on CPRIT Scholars and highlighting CPRIT Scholars. So you'll see some new features like that. And of course, it'll all be reorganized, a different look. So I think you'll be very pleased with it.
Great. I know that has been a long time in the making and
It is.
required a lot of
really,
hard
we need
work.
to recognize Terry and the IT team and Spencer and Chris really for their hard work in making this a reality. So
Good.
It's gonna be
Thank you
great.
all, Spencer and Chris.
one other update that's not in your memo is in regards to the conference. We released an RFP on those RFPs for hotel venues were due on November 16th. And we used essentially the same RFP we'd used in previous years. We even expanded the dates that we would consider, and we got no responses.
Zero?
Zero. We're doing right now is reaching out to hotels and trying to understand, what the barriers were, and we will be reposting that once we have some more information and figure out how to repost the RFP. The good thing is we have some time.
Yeah.
We were looking at 2020. We gave them options of the summer because we know that's slow for the hotels, or the January, February of 21, which we're finding out some initial feedback may not be a good time for the hotels anyway. So we're still trying to figure out what their barriers were and why they did not, because we initially had quite a bit of interest in the RFA. I know we had about 6 hotels that asked questions. And so we thought, we're going to get a good number, but by deadline, we had not received any.
But January, February of 21, the legislature will be in session, right? Doesn't that make it much more difficult to find a hotel that can house us?
In Austin.
So-
Because-
Oh.
But we were also looking in Houston and in Dallas.
Oh, okay.
And so, yes, the hotels in Austin might be reluctant to have rooms available at the state rate. And that's a big barrier, is really our requirements to pay the state per diem and our limitations on certain things we can and cannot do. So more information to come, but wanted to update you on where we were.
Have you looked at other cities besides Dallas?
San Antonio, Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, the major cities that would have a large enough venue for, 800. We use a lot of meeting space, especially with the poster sessions and the ballrooms. And so, we even had some questions about, well, what if we just gave you overnight rooms, sleeping rooms? Could you have the meeting somewhere else? And we're like, no, we need a package deal. We need it all. So it's a lot of space requirement.
The Texas Transplantation Society used to have its annual meeting on Padre Island. There's a couple of hotels, and that people always like that one.
Yeah, it's a nice venue.
Any questions for Dr. Garcia? Any questions for Dr. Garcia? Thank you very much for your report. Appreciate it very much. Let's see. You're up, right? Members, as you may be aware, our former product development officer, Mike Lang, left CPRIT in October. Kristen Doyle is serving as interim chief product development officer while CPRIT is seeking a permanent replacement. The chair recognizes Ms. Doyle to present the product development research program update.
Members.
You gotta sit down here.
Members, my memo is behind tab 7 in your book. I'll just briefly go over it. An update from the fiscal year 18 Cycle 2 awards. You approved 3 product development grants in August. One of those grants was approved with contingencies before we could execute the contract. That's Carisso. As we notified you at the August meeting, they were acquired by Magnolia Neurosciences, and so now they have been renamed Magnolia Tejas. We are continuing to work with them. They have done great work in completing almost everything that we need in terms of the contract contingencies, and we expect that we shall be able to execute a contract with them shortly. As you also may recall from the August meeting, the PDRC, the Product Development Review Council, had sought more information from 2 companies that were in that review process for the fiscal year 18 Cycle 2 review. They received information from one of the companies, and the PDRC met together in October and reviewed the information, and based on that, they decided not to recommend that company for an award. There's one company left. They are submitting information in December. The PDRC will review that information, and if they recommend that company for an award, that recommendation will come to you in February. We are in the end stages of our review process for fiscal year, the first review cycle for fiscal year 2019. You can see the information about that on page 7-2 in your books. We had 38 applications. 25 of those were seed companies. We are at the stage now where we have completed the in-person presentations, and the panels have recommended 9 companies to go through due diligence. So that due diligence is starting now. You will see recommendations, if any, for these 9 companies at the February meeting. The last thing to tell you about for product development is the Cycle 2 Fiscal Year 2019 awards, requests for applications. We are planning on releasing those probably by December 5th. Originally, we had planned on November 30th, but after the review of we did our inaugural seed company applications, and after we went through that review, the review council wanted to work more on the request for applications to make sure that we're getting exactly the information that we want to get from those companies, and that it's clear to the companies how the review council is going to review them. So we have met with the review council. Rosemary French, the senior program officer for product development, has worked very hard in terms of revising that request for applications for seed. And so that will take us just a little bit more time. We think we'll get it posted by December 5th. And I said that was my last thing. The one thing I want to add, Mr. Roberts is about to make this presentation, but Product Development Subcommittee did also discuss the fiscal year 2020 program priorities and is recommending the same program priorities from fiscal year 2019. I think that's it. Anybody have any questions?
That's my line. Any questions?
Any update on finding a new director? Or is it?
I reported on that earlier. We have closed the posting. We have a number of applicants, attractive candidates that we will be conducting phone interviews next week. And the timeline that I discussed with you and Mr. Montgomery earlier is still on target. We're on target to meet that, and I anticipate having the successful candidate on board sometime the last 2 weeks of January.
Thank you. Let me know if I could be of any assistance.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions for Ms. Doyle? Yes, sir. Dr. Rice.
And I don't remember how this goes, but is there any structured interview that's going to happen with any kind of parts of the Oversight Committee? It seems like we did that maybe part of this process before. I don't remember that. It's obviously your hire, and we approve. I don't know how that works. But was there any interest in getting Oversight Committee involvement in that interview process?
I would say that is a level of invasion into the CEO's job that we probably should stay away from. But Mr. Roberts.
I'll be happy to engage you into the process. I was hoping to move this along as expeditiously as possible. We did have a pretty fast posting period, and I am hoping to move this along and was trying to minimize calendar conflicts, but I'll be happy to talk to you about the candidates that are coming forward.
Yeah, I wasn't really trying to change the process. I just was thinking of the chief scientific officer. It seems like we had a different
It's definitely
process.
a different. It is, yes,
So
sir.
that-
It is definitely a different process.
Okay, fair enough.
I really want, in the case of that position, to have the input of the medical doctors on the Oversight Committee. So it's a little bit different.
Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Doyle? Ms. Doyle, I just want to express the thanks of the Oversight Committee for you taking on this additional job in addition to everything else you do. So we appreciate it very much.
Thank you, and I want to recognize Rosemary French for all of the help. I could not do this without her, so it's much appreciated.
Thank you, Ms. French. I believe we move on to Mr. Roberts to present the appointments to the Scientific and Prevention Program Review Panels.
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. I appointed 21 experts to the peer review panels. Our statute requires that my appointments be approved by the Oversight Committee, The Nominations Subcommittee discussed the appointments at its meeting on November 9th and does recommend that you vote to approve the appointments. I'd like to point out that the material in the hard book just includes their names, but much greater biographical and research experience is contained in the electronic version. But I request your approval of these appointments.
Are there any questions for Mr. Roberts on these proposed appointments? If not, is there a motion to approve the Scientific Research and Prevention Program Committee appointments?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion
Mr.
carries.
Montgomery, if I could, just very quickly, I'd like to call to your attention, we also have the University Advisory Committee that those members are statutorily appointed by the chancellors or the presidents of the specified institutions. And since we last met, the University of Houston has changed their representative to Dr. Claudia Newhouser, who's the Associate Vice Chancellor and Associate Vice President for Research and Technology on their campus. And Texas A&M has appointed Dr. Peter Davis, who is the head of the IBT program, and he's also professor of Translational Cancer Center at A&M. I will say that I'm particularly excited. I don't know Dr. Newhouser, but Dr. Davis and I have worked in previous capacities. He is a great supporter of CPRIT, and I'm extremely excited about his appointment to the University Advisory Committee.
Great, thank you. I believe we now move on to the three proposed appointments to the Advisory Committee on Childhood Cancer. Mr. Roberts.
Yes, and this is a situation where actually the presiding officer proposes the appointments based upon my recommendation to the Advisory Committee. And I would request that you approve Mr. Montgomery's appointments.
Can you tell us where they are? Yes, they're on 9. Yeah, there we go.
9-1, yes.
Well,
there they are. They're on page 9-2.
Right.
There's their names, and I believe that greater
Dr.
detail
Gorlick
is in the electronic.
I'm really glad I picked Dr. Gorlick. He's terrific.
Yeah, what's behind that is we saw a presentation by Dr. Gorlick over in Houston. He was outstanding.
He really is something else. And he said, it's just by way of sidelight, he was thankful for CPRIT, but he also mentioned that the scientific environment in Texas, and particularly at MD Anderson, was light years better in terms of cooperation than it was at Sloan Kettering or at the, I believe he came originally, he comes to us from another institution. Anyway, he was excited to be here, and it showed in his talk. Anyway, let's talk about, do we need approval for? Yes, we do, for those three members.
Yes.
Right? Yes. I'll entertain a motion to approve appointments to the Advisory Committee on Childhood Cancer.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roberts. I believe you are still up to bat for staff recommendations for FY 2020 program priorities.
Yes, sir. Thank you. As summarized in the memo on page 10-1, state law requires you to set priorities for each grant program annually. Each program subcommittee discussed the fiscal year 2020 priorities, and all voted at their meetings earlier this month to recommend to the full OC approve the proposed fiscal year 20 priorities. Except for in addition to the priorities for the academic research program, the 2020 program priorities are the same as the priorities adopted in January for FY 2019. I recommend and request approval.
Any questions? In that case, I'll entertain a motion to approve the FY 2020 program priorities. All in favor? Oh, sorry, some of them. Great. Makes it a little difficult for the minute taker over there, but all in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. We run a really tight ship here at CPRIT. I believe we now have Weaver and Tidwell to present the audit FY 2019 internal audit plan and schedule. Ms. Martin, you have changed a lot since the last time I saw you.
Yes.
Yeah.
The facial hair tends to do that.
Yeah, right.
Now, Elisa sends her regrets not being able to be here today. Dan Graves with Weaver presenting in her place. She will be sorely disappointed to hear that the compliance report is now your favorite part of this meeting instead of our presentation.
It was a tight race.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. Happy to, though, present to you our current progress here in the first quarter of fiscal year 19 as part of the 2019 internal audit plan.
Yeah, but, let me just point the members into the right section. This is tab 11.
11-1, yes, I apologize for that.
No, that's quite all right.
11-1 includes our report. We did have 2 internal audits on the plan for this year, state reporting and then budget and planning. We, as of the preparation of this report on October 29th, prior to presenting it to the audit subcommittee, that audit was in progress. We began field work on October 22nd. If you turn to page 11-3 in your materials, you will see the risk coverage for that internal audit. And we are currently in the exit conference and reporting stage. We'll be moving into that here in the next few weeks. The next, but
if you're on the, pardon me, if on page 11-3, there's a column of numbers. Those are not significant for any reason other than just to demarcate.
Other than just a quantity, correct?
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And just for clarification for certainly our new member, David, not that you need any help, of course, but, this state reporting audit, which is here, he's reminding us that these are the risks that are defined that they'll be looking for to address in the audit, those 15 there. It took me 2 years to figure out what the heck they were talking about.
Yeah.
I thought it's trying to save you some time.
We prepared this early on as a response to the audit subcommittee, just to present the risks that were included in the scope of the internal audit. Having this being your first meeting, the state reporting audit does cover the statutory reporting requirements that CPRIT is required to complete for the areas listed there in our report, annual reports, Texas Cancer Plan, Public Information Act, and other ad hoc reporting as well.
And each of our, I'm sorry, Chair, I'll do it in one more sentence. Each of our audits will have this kind of a delineated, delineation of what the risks are that are being addressed for each of these, and then we'll have follow-ups after they finish the audit, et cetera.
Correct, yes.
As a new member of the audit subcommittee, I just wanted to make sure you were sort of in the flow.
It's helpful. It's helpful because it can be befuddling. In spite of the clarity of the reports. Proceed, please. Or is that it?
That's all for state reporting, yes.
Okay.
The next audit is budgeting and planning. That is scheduled to start next week. We do have a meeting actually scheduled tomorrow with management to discuss the scope and iron out the finer points, but that will begin to be performed before the start of the new year in hopes to only have wrap-up and reporting in any part of the oncoming legislative session. So the major internal auditing will be performed before legislative session begins, and that was the goal for this year. Is also trying to minimize interruptions to any IT processes like the development and rollout of the new website. So that was the plan for this year. We do also, as Dr. Rice mentioned, have follow-up reporting as part of the internal audit plan as well. You'll see that we have 5 different follow-ups on the plan for this year.
And what page are you on?
It's 11-1.
Okay.
It starts on 11-1 and rolls to 11-2.
Okay.
We are still in the process of our first. We began field work on October 22nd for follow-up over the SAO findings from their performance measures report. And so we are also in the wrap-up and reporting stages of that as well. We've just completed the field work. We do have the others on the plan for February, including information security, communications, post-award grant monitoring, and then procurement and P cards. There's 10 findings across those, and you can see that on Schedule 11-4.
Could you take a minute and just tell us what is on page 11-4, particularly for Dr. Cummings' benefit?
Absolutely.
Because this chart is quite large and all those colors.
All the colors and
Yeah,
all the small print.
very confusing.
We prepared this schedule for the Oversight Committee and the Audit Subcommittee, and management for that matter, to just demonstrate the number of findings in the various internal audits and their status. And so you'll see, going all the way back to 2015, were the audits that and the audit findings that we inherited when we, from the predecessor auditors when we came on board. And we followed up on those, and you'll see the different fiscal years, the status, any report ratings that were given for the reports, and then the columns on the far right show the number of initial findings. Then the next set of columns is the number of closed findings, and then the total findings for that audit. And so the very bottom...
Findings is a nice way to say deficiency.
Correct.
Right,
Yes.
okay.
Any internal audit findings. The very bottom chart, the fiscal 2019 summary, shows just what's remaining as open. And so if you look on the far right column of that very bottom row, the 10 internal audit findings are what are currently open from prior audits, and obviously the top rows on that are blank from any findings that might come from this year's audits. But that bottom row is the real summary. Everything above it is the detail of when it occurred and in what part of the year, or what part of our history with CPRIT.
Okay, great. I'm sure now Dr. Cummings can explain it all to us.
Yes.
Now that he knows it. Thank you very much. Anything further or any questions?
I have nothing further, so any questions?
Questions? Thank you very much. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
And you know, the competition for the most interesting is still open.
Okay. Well, we'll do our best for the next
good.
meeting in February to make sure that we are the most interesting.
Well, their chart has more things on it than anyone else's. Chair recognizes Ms. Eckel to discuss the most the proposed administrative rule changing. Sorry, Ms. Eckel, I was not laughing at you. I was laughing at your colleague.
I would just like to say I don't really think it's a competition of which section is most exciting. We all know it's the rules.
Yeah.
So.
Good point.
Okay, as usual, there are both rules proposed for final adoption as well as new proposed rule changes, and I'll start with the rules proposed for adoption. If you'll remember, those are the rules from the August Oversight Committee meeting, where if a grantee has a required report that the due date falls on a weekend or a federal holiday, we're giving them an extra day to file that report. Those rule changes were published in the Texas Register on September 28th, and we did not get any public comments, so they're presented for final adoption just as you saw them in August. Next steps, we'll file them with the Secretary of State to become final 20 days later. And unless there are any questions about those, I'll move on to the proposed rules, the new proposed rule changes, which starts the rulemaking process over again. We have 4 proposed rule changes, all in Chapter 703. The first one is in 703.3, and it allows for a process for product development applicants to request a refund of their application fee, which they're required to submit to help offset the cost of review for product development applications. This would be allowed if their application falls out of the administrative review process, which occurs prior to peer review evaluation of the applications. The second proposed change is in 7. Yes.
Turn your mic, please.
Can you explain why we want to refund the money? Because we would have already expended time and effort.
Well, at that point, there's much less time and effort since they haven't even been assigned probably to a review panel yet. This is really in the administrative, did they check all the boxes part, so they haven't gone through the peer review, phone conference, or in person, or IP, or business due diligence, or any of that. So we think it's an equitable remedy for the applicant if their application comes out of the process really before any evaluation occurs.
But CPRIT still did put in time and energy even at that point.
No, certainly they did put in time and energy, but it's the same time and energy that would go to any of the programs and the applications that are that initial receipt period of receiving applications in response to an RFA. So no extra effort or any of the extra IP or business due diligence have gone into the product development applications at that time.
Would it make more sense for a partial refund instead of a total refund?
We left it open that it's up to the applicant to request and CPRIT to review the request and to determine if the refund is allowed. We haven't set specifically the amount.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions on that rule change? Okay, moving on, the second proposed change is in 703.13, and it just slightly adjusts the due date for grantees to submit a required audit, changing it from 270 days to 9 months, just helping grantees better calculate when the due date falls, and so it's a little easier to do that based on months instead of specific amount of days. The next proposed change is in 703.21, and this specifically applies to prevention grantees that receive their grant award within the last fiscal quarter of the state fiscal year, and it would set their initial reporting period for their first quarterly progress report as September 1st, so the first quarter of the next fiscal year, just to allow them the opportunity to have a report on a full fiscal quarter as opposed to a partial quarter. We did something very similar for all grantees as it relates to FSRs, just so they don't have a day or two reporting period.
You might just explain the FSR. What is that? Cummings benefit.
Oh, sure, it's fascinating. So for grantees who are awarded a grant award in the last fiscal quarter of the state fiscal year, usually during the August Oversight Committee meeting, those contracts have an effective date. I believe it's August 31st, which is required to have it that way. So instead of having grantees have a partial FSR reporting period.
What is an FSR?
It is a financial status report, how grantees report their expenditures to CPRIT and request a refund. Sorry, I was doing a deeper dive. I just get so excited.
I'd like to interject here that I have a number of staff who find FSRs and these activities is quite interesting since their paycheck is derived from their evaluations.
Yeah, shout out to grant accountants and grant compliance team. They're much more in the weeds on that. Lastly, the last rule change is in 703.22 relating to grantee compliance training, and it just slightly adjusts the due date for when all grantees need to complete their annual training. Currently, it's at November 1st. We want to change it to December 31st. Again, just a little bit easier tracking to have it based on a calendar year instead of November 1st. So those are all the proposed rule changes. We did submit these changes to the governor's office. They did not have any comments or changes, so next steps, we'll submit them to the Texas Register for opportunity for public comment and publication, and then bring them back at the February Oversight Committee meeting.
Ms. Doyle, do you have a question or comment?
I wanted to point out, following up on Mr. Burgess's presentation for fiscal year 2018, the proposed amendment that we have changing from 270 days to 9 months, and what the Oversight Committee approved previously, changing deadlines that fall on weekends or holidays to the next business day. We have a number of delinquent reports that are delinquent only because, they filed within 9 months rather than 270 days, or they filed on a Monday instead of a Saturday. So both of these changes were recommended by compliance so that we are kind of filtering out the noise, these people who would otherwise be compliant, so that we can really identify where there are issues. So it seems minor, it seems very crazy that we're going from 270 to 9 months, but there is reasoning behind it.
To make it easy on the compliance department?
They're very needy.
And since I have my mic on, I will say I thanked Rosemary French for helping while I'm doing the interim product development role, and also Cameron has been an incredible help on the legal side while I'm juggling these jobs. So I appreciate that very much.
Thank you for the comment. Thank you, Ms. Eckel. If you are finished, I will ask for a
Although
motion.
I can go on if you want. But
Well, unfortunately, we're running, I'm getting a little hungry, and so
Okay.
I have to stop you.
no, that's unfinished.
Right. I'll read it all several more times, though. You can. Members, is there a motion to approve final order adopting rule changes to Texas Administrative Code Chapter 703? Is there? Well, let me just combine this with a motion to approve the publication of the proposed changes to Texas Administrative Code Chapter 703 as detailed by Ms. Eckel.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Eckel. Ms. Doyle, proposed changes to the Section 3.15 of the Oversight Committee bylaws.
Very quickly, we're making a minor change. The section that we're changing talks about Oversight Committee training. Our rules require periodic training for the Oversight Committee members. We have annual training in the bylaws, so we are making our bylaws consistent with our administrative rules. So it would be periodic training rather than annual training.
I am very much in favor of that change. I'll entertain a motion to approve change to the Oversight Committee bylaws, Section 3.15, as described by Ms. Doyle.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Moving right along, if the members are okay, I think we just go right through before we break for lunch, because we don't have all that much more to do. Ms. McConnell, the Chief Operating Officer's report.
Good afternoon. I'd like to just highlight in the report that I provided in Section 14 of your book that we've collected through the end of FY18 $186,000 in revenue sharing payments from grantees, and so the total revenue sharing payments for the life of the agency is about $3.4 million. The other thing that I wanted to highlight was our debt issuance, and we issued $222.2 million in debt, in commercial paper debt, through the end of FY18. That's actually was fixed out in long-term debt in September. But through the life of the agency, we've issued a total of $1.5 billion in debt, both for our operating expenses and our grants. And I have a table that I've received from the Texas Public Finance Authority, and so based on what we've issued to date, what our grant awards, outstanding grant awards, and then what we project to award in the future years, we estimate we'll issue about $2.9 billion in principal at a cost of $1.6 billion in interest. And that actually goes out through 2047. So that's a long time. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Ms. McConnell?
Does the increase in interest rates affect our bonds at all?
It does. Actually, the TPFA has estimated our commercial paper rates in FY18 at 4.75%. In FY19, they increased that to 5.25%. And for 2020 and 2021, it's up to 5.5%. And then for 2022 and beyond, it's 7.5%.
Wow.
So.
It's expensive money. Any other question for Ms. McConnell? Ms. McConnell, thank you very much. Members, CPRIT's bylaws require that oversight committees, the Oversight Committee to vote on to approve appointments to subcommittees. I have previously requested, and he has agreed, that Dr. David Cummings become a member of the Prevention and Audit Subcommittees. He will fill a critical vacancy on the Prevention Subcommittee, which currently has only 2 members, and he will bring new life, excitement, and energy to the Audit Subcommittee. Any questions? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve Dr. Cummings' appointments to the Prevention and Audit Subcommittees?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. I think that means I'm all for it. Okay. Items 20 and 21 are standing agenda items, but I believe we have nothing to take up at this time. Consultation with General Counsel or any compliance investigations. So we will move on to closing. CPRIT has scheduled the next regular Oversight Committee for Thursday, February 21st. Please note this is a change from our regular scheduled Wednesday meetings. Because of the legislative session, we will have to meet in February and May in the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board offices. If there is no further business, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
All in favor? We stand adjourned at 12:23 p.m. Thank you all very much.